Today we're starting chapter 6 in Tanya. And chapter 6, fascinating chapter, introduces us to a new topic. Remember, in chapter 1 we were introduced to the animal soul. In chapter 2 we were introduced to the godly soul. And in 3, 4, and 5 we spoke about the anatomy of the godly soul. But in chapter 6, 7, and 8 we're not introducing, we're going back into the animal soul. We're trying to understand the anatomy of the animal soul and how its operating system, how it operates. We spoke generally about the godly soul having 10 attributes, what we call the 10 sfirot. Some were intellectual, 3 of them were intellectual, and 7 of them were emotional. Collectively, 3 plus 7 equals 10. That makes up the 10 sfirot, the 10 attributes. Remember, we said man was created in the image of God, and just like God was, or chose to express itself through 10 forms of expression, intellectual and emotional, God could have chosen to express itself in many other ways. It didn't only have to be through wisdom or through feeling. It could have been through many different ways that God chose to express itself. He just happened to choose intellect and emotion, which break down into 10 different windows of expression. And that godly soul, we said, had 3 garments, 3 forms of clothing, which are thought, speech, and action. We went further to say that the clothing in which the godly soul clothes itself is actually higher than the soul itself. It raises the soul higher to where to what the soul could achieve on its own, which is really very interesting and different because
she has a key. She has a key.
I got it.
Which is really very very counterintuitive, because we didn't really think that a person is less important than their clothing. Nobody ever thought of such a thing, right? Nobody ever thought that a person is less important than their clothing. But we explained it in chapter 4 and 5. We explained that the reason why the godly soul reaches higher when enclosed in its garments and thought, speech, and action is because the godly soul in and of itself is just a piece of God. It's just a piece of God. But when enclosed in its garments of thought, speech, and action, it's actually engaged in mitzvahs and in Torah. It's engaged in mitzvahs and in Torah, and we said that mitzvahs and Torah are one with Hashem Himself, with Hashem itself. God and His Torah are one. All right, God and His mitzvahs are absolutely one. And when you grasp the mitzvah, when you do any mitzvah, when you grasp any content of any Torah at all, you've now grasped God's essence. Whereas the soul in and of itself is an extended piece of God, a distant piece of God. Through engaging in thought, speech, and action in the clothing of the soul is able to actually embrace God itself. Right? And we explained the difference between mitzvahs is when God embraces you. And we said in chapter 5, Torah is one step more than that. When I understand Torah, I actually understand God as well. I understand the Torah. So I'm enveloping the Torah as much as the Torah is enveloping me, because that's the nature of intellect. The nature of intellect is that the wisdom, the known and the knower are indifferentiable. Merged, that's one. That's not a word. Indifferentiate, yeah. They're merged. Indistinguishable is the word I was thinking about. They're indistinguishable, right? But they're merged to the point that you want to make up a new word, because they're so much one, right? They're indistinguishable. The known and the knower are so much one. The knower envelops the known envelops the knower, right? And that's how it works when I understand Torah. When I've grasped a piece of Torah, I've actually grasped God, and God grasps me. So that's how we explained chapter 3, 4, and 5, is that the clothing of the godly soul is actually higher than the godly soul itself, right? Now in chapters 6, 7, and 8, it's like a train station. Now in chapter 6, 7, and 8, we we proceed into the anatomy of the animal soul. And the first thing the Alter Rebbe tells us about the animal soul, it's amazing. It's like the Alter Rebbe is giving us a guided tour through our own psyche. It's incredible. He's telling me about me. He knows me better than I know me. A guided tour of me. It's not some museum of ancient history in Manhattan. You're getting a tour of me right here in the book of Tanya. Who wouldn't want to learn this thing? And he says, you want to get to know your animal soul? Let me tell you a little bit about your animal soul. First thing you need to know about your animal soul is that it's a mirror image of your godly soul. Whatever I just told you about the godly soul wasn't just to review what we've learned until now. It was actually in order to prepare you to understand, to remember what is your animal soul. Because your animal soul also has 10 sfirot, 10 faculties of expression. 3 intellectual and 7 emotional. Again, in the image of God. It's another skill, another set. There's 2 of me in me. Right? My animal soul has intellect and emotion, feelings and wisdom. And it also, and all those 10 attributes, the same ones. The kindness, the chachma bina das, the Chabad of the animal soul. Chachma bina dat, right? And it's got the 7 emotions of chesed, kindness, gvura, strictness, discipline, tiferes, compassion, netzach, which is triumph, hod, which is humility, yesod, which is communication, and malchus, which is kingship. Right? It's got the 7, it's just a mirror image. And like the godly soul has got 3 forms of expression, 3 garments, the animal soul also has 3 garments of expression. And they are thought, speech, and action. Now, can you think 2 things at the same time? Can you speak 2 things at the same time? Can you do 2 things at the same time?
Yes.
The Alter Rebbe was known.
Walk and chew gum.
The Alter Rebbe was known. The Alter Rebbe and the Rebbe also. The Rebbe also was known to be able to write something and speak something, a different subject at the same time.
But then it's on autopilot. You're not doing it's memory. It's body.
I don't know
memory.
what it is.
It's like body memory.
I don't know if that's maybe compartmentalization. I don't know what that is, but it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, it's incredible.
I don't want to downplay it.
Yeah,
I think what it is hyper focus on thought, hyper focus on speech, and hyper focus on action. Instead of we just have one general depot of expression. Whatever I'm expressing outward is going through one place. But maybe such a person has separate, departments of expression. I don't know how that works. I've never had that. I've never been able to do that. I can go as far as mirror writing. The mirror writing when you write the same thing through. It's not that hard, but whatever. When you write, hello, how are you? Whatever. Anyways, it's not a big deal. But can you imagine writing left, right, and right hand? And the Alter Rebbe was able to do this. Left, right, in 2 different things. To write 2 different, 2 different things, 2 different letters to different people. It's amazing. Anyways, so the animal soul and the godly soul share the garments. There's only one thing you can think about at one time. The example I just said was thinking one thing and speaking something else. But when you're thinking, you don't need to think one thing at the same time. I've never heard of somebody that can think multiple things at the same time. I don't know about that. But one thing at a time, speaking one thing at a time, and doing one thing at a time. Right? This in chapter 9, remember we're doing now 6, 7, and 8, is the animal soul's anatomy. But in chapter 9, after we've finished understanding how the animal soul works and what it wants and what drives the animal soul, then in chapter 9, we're going to come back to the wrestling ring.
To the what?
Wrestling ring. We're going to come into the stadium, into the arena, where the 2 souls are fighting. And you may remember, in chapter 9, it's really going to come up, that the 2 souls are in perpetual combat.
Sorry, I know I should have asked this a few weeks ago, but is the animal soul the same as the ego, or I'm
I think it
Because like when we talk about we battle with the ego and the soul, whatever, is that the same idea? Is he using it almost interchangeably?
Yeah, we're gonna say now in chapter 6, we're gonna say that. Well, let me get to that point in just a moment. Let me just finish this and I'll address it fully in just a moment, because that's my next topic. So I just want to finish this point, which is chapter 9 is going to talk about the fight, the war, which is the inner battle that every single one of us experiences. Ground zero is thought, speech, and action. That is the battlefield. Because your animal soul wants expression, your godly soul wants expression, and you are the arbitrator of who will win. Every thought that comes up in your mind, every word that comes out of your mouth, and every act that you do is the result of a battle where there is a winner and there's a loser.
Can you define you? Like which part?
Now that's an interesting question, right? That's a very interesting question.
I've thought about that a lot.
So who's doing this decision, right? So there, elsewhere in Tanya, it's discussed about a nefesh hasichlis, like an arbitrator, a rational arbitrator, which is not biased either way. It's a rational arbitrator that is not biased either way and is able to make that decision. So it's a very complex question, right?
That doesn't make sense, because
why?
If you're
it's a third soul. It's a third soul, which is neither godly nor animalistic.
Because if it's neutral, then how would it choose? Clearly,
it's neutral. It's sometimes called the human soul. Sometimes it's called the human soul.
What is
Right.
that? What are you referring to? Can you back up? Yeah, because I don't.
the part of you that makes the choice between good and bad, like which part of you gets to choose? That's my question.
So that's the free will part.
Yes, that's the free will part.
Right, but what is it called? Like, I have
So it's
a
called-
heart, I have a soul, I have a mind.
So
it's
a third soul. It's a third soul, not the godly soul, not the animal soul. It's getting crowded in here right now, right?
No, but
Something that I didn't know about.
I've always thought about that. Like, I've always struggled with it. Like, which part of it is the part that gets to make the decision?
So that is
whether I'm gonna do the right
that's
thing
called
or not.
nefesh hasichlis. It's the rational soul. It's just rational. It's just rational. It's well, you may want to call it freedom of choice. You may want to call it the human soul. It is just the arbitrator. It's the decider. It's just the one that decides who gets the expression.
The human soul is always a piece of God, but how could the human soul be a piece of God?
It's not a piece of God.
So it's not really a soul.
Remember, there's the first soul was the animal soul,
I
right?
understand. Yeah, I understand.
The second soul is the godly soul. Where does the human soul fit in here, right?
Right.
That's the third one.
But
The third one is just me.
Okay, but it's not really a soul. It's really
It's not I'm not sure. Look, I'm gonna admit, I'm not sure if it's a full-blown soul
right.
with 10
It doesn't
faculties.
it doesn't make sense.
I don't know. I need to research that a little bit more.
It doesn't seem like it could be a soul. The soul
It seems to
only
me
comes-
like
But
the
it
power
must
of
be,
rational
because
decision.
How would it
Does not
relate
come
to the 10 and the 10 if it didn't have... You can't relate to someone unless you have the same thing in
I think it doesn't get emotionally attached to either side.
That would be...
It's rational, which is why it's
more observation.
It's intellectual.
It's called intellectual soul, and I think it doesn't have an emotional component. You know, when you get emotional about something, that's when you start making mistakes.
Right.
You know,
I get that.
so that's just a rational soul. It's just intellectual. It's all it is. Nefesh hasichlis is the way the Alter Rebbe calls it, and that's the arbitrator.
Doesn't let emotions get involved.
Yeah, it doesn't have emotions, and that's the one that decides. You know what? I want
If
emotion.
that were true, we'd always choose good. Because
Really?
when we choose not good, it's always because my emotions overwhelm me and I got sucked
Well,
in.
hold on. I got to answer your previous
Right.
question. I still have to answer your previous
you're not
question. What
looking
drives the animal soul? Hang on. Is what drives the animal soul evil?
Is it?
No.
Let's think about that.
Is
Well,
it but
it's
is
called
it
the animal
ego,
soul.
is what he was saying.
So I just want to get to that in a moment, to your
Animals
question.
aren't evil.
That's right. I didn't say evil. You
They
said
just
evil.
want what they want.
You said evil. I didn't say evil. Right?
And
You
doesn't
said
it
evil.
seem that the animal soul is stronger than the godly soul?
Okay, so that's what we're
Because
going to
it
get into.
seems to be more
So Corey, that's what we're going to get
easier
into
to do
in
because
chapters
we-
9 through 17. 9 through 17 is going to
Right.
talk about the battlefield.
Strengthen, that's true.
It's going to talk about the battle. Because remember, your animal soul is all guns blazing from the moment that you're born.
yes.
But your godly soul only shows up at the bar mitzvah. Right? It starts coming in at the bris, and it finishes coming in at the bar mitzvah. So your godly soul
Ours are just
doesn't have its shoes on, before the animal soul is running laps around it, right? And it's actually called, definitely has the upper hand. Absolutely has the upper hand, no doubt.
The godly soul is clothed within the animal soul.
Yes, that's a little more advanced, so I don't want to get into that right now. But yes, it is, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I did want to just set the stage and say that there's only one set of garments of thought, speech, and action. I didn't want you to think that there's two sets of garments. Like there's two sets of intellect and there's two sets of emotion. There you do have two sets, but where you only have one set is in the bottleneck, which is thought, speech, and action, which is the actual garments. And which is why when you speak, think, or act, you've somebody's won and somebody's lost a battle. Right? When you're having a conversation with your friends and you've got some really juicy piece of slander to share about someone, something which is just gonna fire up the conversation it's gonna just pour fuel on the fire. It's gonna be great. You just got something.
You're not gonna believe this.
Yeah, it's one of those.
Where did you hear this one?
So you will not believe what the rabbi told me or did or whatever. Something really fun. So there you're going to have to make a decision. Fast. You're going to have to decide, am I going to give expression? And here you can actually see it very consciously, because I love to use this example because it's so important. Lashon hara is like the worst thing you could do. It's terrible sin. So I like to make this example because you always get a chance to think before you say something like this. Or even when you want to erupt in anger from a text message or somebody said something to you, that's also a sin, to erupt in anger. And you can choose to, right? Or you can just choose to let it rip, and just read them the riot act, and
Or you could do
it feels so good.
I have a 48-hour rule. No,
Oh, really?
If you're angry, I don't say anything for 48
shut down 48
hours.
hours. That's pretty intense.
And after 48 hours, if I'm still upset, then I say something.
Okay.
99% it's gone.
So when you do that, that's a great method, the 48-hour rule.
Rule.
Yeah, I think I do the 48-second rule. So I do the 48-second rule. If I'm lucky, right? So
Translate sichos, nefesh hasichos.
irrational.
Rational.
Yeah. Sechel.
Intellectual.
Do you really need a third one?
Yeah. I think so,
It's
because
clicking. I totally understand it now.
beautiful.
Yeah, it makes total sense.
You do. You need
Makes
it,
total
because otherwise, how
sense.
you gonna?
Isn't that ultimately?
But
You're
don't
given-
worry about it. Hang on. I don't want to put the cart before the horse, because right now we're dealing with the animal soul.
Okay.
Let's understand
No,
the animal soul before
forget
we
the
can
third
understand if we need the third soul and why. Okay. But we just at least wanted to mention it. So I wanted to give you the context, because in this style of Tanya teaching, I want to make sure that everybody's clear about the continuum. I don't want to lose the forest because of the trees.
Good.
You know what I mean? I don't want to get lost in the details that we forget where we're going and where we're coming from. I want to make sure we know where we are in the map of the universe, So I was just in the middle of saying that when you're about to say that juicy piece of Lashon Hara, and it feels so good. It feels so good to say it. But Rabbi, it's true, and you feel so self-righteous in sharing it. It's such a mitzvah to share this piece of Lashon Hara, right? By the way, when you say, but Rabbi, it's the truth, who's saying that to you?
Your ego.
It's the intellect of your animal soul. It's explaining why I need to be doing this. Right? It's so sneaky, right? I want you to realize the animal soul's got its own set of rationale. He's got his own machine, his own factory over there, producing all sorts of great ideas why you have to watch this movie right now.
Everybody's always rationalizing bad things.
Exactly. That's what I want you to understand.
And the smarter you are, the harder it is. Because
Yes.
Your mind.
But I want to say to you one more thing. Because that's a very good point. In chapter 9, we're going to say, Ze leumat ze asa Elokim. When we're introduced to Jacob and Esau in the belly of Rebecca, we're going to go visit them soon in Israel. All right, now, a little context before we go there. It says that Rebecca had a really weird pregnancy because her because her
Which of you ladies wants to come in?
because no, normally, by the way, Ashley is here,
Yeah.
and she handles this very well. You should just know it's only in this morning, twilight zone.
At 10 o'clock.
Exactly, it's only in the twilight zone in the morning that really we have this little issue here. But back to this. So I just want to say that we go through this weird pregnancy of Rivka, wife of Yitzchak, and she's very confused about her pregnancy. Further, the Torah doesn't get into too much detail, but the Medrash tells us that when she would go past the house of idolatry, the baby would try to come out, and when she walked past the house of monotheism, the baby would try to come out. And she was like, what kind of weirdo do I have in here? That is drawn to both idolatry and monotheism. Like, this guy's like seriously confused. And she was deeply concerned. She has her father, no, she has her husband Yitzchak, right? Who's monotheist. She has her brother-in-law, Ishmael, who is an idolater. And she's like, hey, make up your mind. You want to be like Ishmael, your uncle? Fine.
Why do you say Ishmael was an idolater if he was the founder of Muslim faith? So they're not idolaters.
At the time, I think Islam is only started like he was the father of the biological people. I don't think Ishmael was an Islamist.
No,
He did it. Islam began 1,500 years ago.
After Christianity.
Yeah, 1,500 years old.
So you're talking about Muslim.
Yeah, he just happens to be the genetic line. That's all the Arabs. So what happens is that she was like really concerned about this very confused person in her belly until she goes to Shem and Aver. The Noach is the son of Noach is Shem, and he tells her Shnei goyim bevitneich, 2 nations you have in your belly. Ule'om mile'om ye'ematz. Each one will struggle with the other. V'rav ya'avod sa'ir, the greater one will serve the younger one, right? And then he says further, when the one shall rise, the other will fall. Right? And like, okay, very good. So we get a little view into the OBGYN over there of Rivka, and we're wondering why do we need this information? Because the Torah is not there telling us a historical account of a doctor's visit. It's telling us about our soul. Rivka is our matriarch, not because we come from her, but because we are her. Her pregnancy is our pregnancy. We have not one but 2 within us. We're drawn to animalism and we're drawn to godlyism. Right? We're confused, and it's okay because they're fighting. And the way they're fighting is they're equally matched. Right. That's what I wanted to get to. Yeah. They're equally matched. You're not gonna get a what's his name? Mike Tyson fighting against Joe Goldstein. It's not gonna work. The accountant, right? They're gonna have him against Mike Tyson, right? It's gonna be equally matched. And if you have a very smart animal soul, you should know that you have an equally smart godly soul. Mm-hmm. They're equally matched. Right?
Makes sense.
It's been in hiding. Right, so it's time to come out of the closet now, right? No, but seriously, you should know that if you've recognized and embraced the fact that you have a very creative animal soul, then you should embrace the fact that you have an equally creative godly soul.
Even if the one that manifests itself is one, not the other.
The other one is there.
The other one is there too.
It's just unconscious.
You repressed it.
Right.
Yeah, it's being knocked unconscious. Bring out the smelling salts, learn some Tanya, meditate, wake it up, and when that comes up, you can have a giant.
Yeah, but the more,
brace yourself.
But the more we tap into the godly soul, the stronger the animal soul is going to get to try.
And I always warn people when you begin your Baal Teshuvah journey, brace yourself, because your animal soul is not going to take this lightly. Yeah. It's not going to take this without a fight. Which is why I always tell people that you'll find when you come closer to Yiddishkeit, to Torah, and to mitzvahs, your questions are going to increase. Your doubts are going to build up. Your creative opposition, the creativity and the creative arguments of the opposition to Torah are going to be much greater than you've ever experienced, because your animal soul is terrified right? And that's what you're going to experience. It's absolutely normal. It means that you're growing spiritually.
It's exactly
Right?
You told me this when I first came here. I'm not sure
I
I
told
would
this to my daughter. I told my daughter.
You know, Gail, you learn what you need to learn when you're ready to hear it.
Yeah.
Trying to change your mind.
So are you saying
My
that
father
you're
says,
not
my father says that when it comes to shidduch, why don't you know all the information up front?
To get scared away.
Because you get scared away, right? That's why. If you knew everything up front, you'd never do the shidduch.
You're right.
That's why Hashem gives you the information that you need when you're ready to hear it.
I don't think we're
Sorry, Tanya, that's the way it works.
the animal soul is starting
It's okay, you got a good one.
at the Marat
Found out
He's talking about himself.
You're not going to get to see
Found out
Yitzchak Rivka.
Oh, we'll see them from a distance. He's asking about in Israel. If in Hebron we'll be able to go to Yitzchak and Rivka, and the answer is not really. We'll see them from the gates.
Yeah.
But I mean, you could technically go in there, but I'm not sure if you'd come out.
I wouldn't recommend it.
Going in where?
I mean, you probably would come out, but yeah, whatever. I
There's
mean,
a part that's
God forbid.
designated for Arabs, and
for
that's the
Arabs.
Yitzchak and Rivka.
In Hebron.
Get to
Yeah,
accept
we have
Passover.
enough places to
Yeah, he's our guy.
He's
Yeah.
our guy.
He's our guy.
Yeah, whatever.
No, he's both.
All right, back to Tanya here. So we were saying, and I still haven't forgotten your point over there, which is where the animal soul's ego. I'm getting to that right now. So I just wanted to. I've explained where we're coming from in Tanya, and I explained where we're going in Tanya. And by the way, where we're going in Tanya is going to take us back to our original question, the very beginning of chapter 1, which asked. Remember, we were each made to make an oath before we were born that you will become a tzaddik, and that you will not be a rasha. You'll be righteous, and you won't be evil. Right? We were made to take this oath. We were like, really? I made this oath? Okay. Well, what is... Yeah, what is... You probably missed that. We were made to take that oath. Then we'll come back to it. But what is it, tzaddik? What did I swear? What did I sign on to? Right? And what am I... What's this deal, right? So we didn't even know what a tzaddik is. What is a righteous person? Well, a righteous person is one that doesn't hurt anybody and helps the old ladies cross the street. That's what a lot of people think. But that's not what it is. Right? And a Russia is a wicked person. Well, Hitler is a wicked person. Okay, good. But you know, that's not what the oath was. Once we understand the dynamic of the animal soul and what drives it, and the godly soul and what drives it, and how they conflict, now we're starting to
That
understand
makes so much more
the
sense.
fight is the thought, speech, and action. This is the war zone, and that's what defines, separates the mice from the men, the tzaddik from the Russia, and the middle guy. The Bain and evil. That's what we're going to be talking about in chapters 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. Right? So just a general view of where we are. Let's go dive into the animal soul. Ready? So Gail asked a question. I'm sorry, did somebody else have a question before we go further? Were you? No. Fine. Gail asked a question.
Ego.
So Gail said, we said, what drives the godly soul? That's pretty self-explanatory. It's godliness. And we spoke about last time about how the godly soul is godly. It's an out-of-body experience. It's kind of awkward relating to your godly soul because you really have to relate to something which feels a little foreign. You really have to abnegate self in order to identify with the godly soul. It almost feels like other, like a little different because it's not human, it's a godly soul. Tanya helps us understand that lies at our core. We are godly beings, and therefore it's okay to relate to that. But what the animal soul is what we actually more identify with. Because the animal soul is driven by ego, by a sense of self.
To survive.
Right, so it's a survival instinct, right, which we all
More
have.
than that.
Well,
It starts with that.
it starts with
We
survival.
talk if you're into the Maslow part, it's you get
hierarchy.
to hierarchy, but it's all self-focused.
Yeah.
The self-actualization is still long after survival, after you eat, after nobody's chasing you
I know,
to
but
kill
that's
you.
where it starts.
But
Right, so let me explain.
Self-actualization is still animal soul.
Right, so survival is nothing wrong with survival. Survival is good. It's important. This is why we don't walk off buildings and we don't put our hands on the fire because we have an instinct to survive, which is very important. But beyond that, there is an obsession with self. Remember, Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden were godly beings. They were humans, but they were perfectly expressive and transparent of godliness. God was able to relate to them directly. He spoke to them straight up. There was no sense of self. There was no sense of shame. It says that they would have marital relations in the Garden of Eden in broad daylight because there was no shame, there was no self, there was nothing to be embarrassed of. It was the same way that they would like tefillin. They would have relations. There wasn't anything to be embarrassed of. But the moment that they ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they now had an intimate relationship with good and evil. They now had an animal soul. They now had a sense of self-awareness, and the first thing that they needed to do was to cover up their nakedness. They now had a sense of ego, and that ego is what we have been struggling with for the past 5,779 years and a half. We've been struggling with it, and the punishments that God gave Adam and Eve were not so much punishments as much as they were control mechanisms to keep our ego in check, to keep our ego from going out of control. For women to be given the consequence of the pain of childbirth and the pain of child rearing keeps her ego from becoming out of control. When a man has to break his ego, realizing that he has to work hard by the sweat of his brow to earn a living, that can break any man's ego. And if that's not enough, then the angel of death certainly breaks everyone's ego.
When you say they covered up, is that really just like a metaphor for once the ego was introduced, they covered up their vulnerability?
It could also be that, but it definitely is literal as well. It's definitely, till this day, we wear clothing, and we know how uncomfortable we are being unclothed in public. You sense that.
In Europe. But why, if they were a couple and there was no one there, even if they had an ego, I'm not sure why they felt shame.
Well, they would relate to God. God was like their buddy.
Right.
It's more of a self-awareness than of shame.
So a line was created between the tangible and the intangible when they ate from the tree of knowledge.
What do you mean by that?
Well, because before the tree
God
of knowledge,
was one of them.
they were completely unified with
God,
the
yeah.
intangible.
The intangible, okay.
And then when they ate,
Okay, if you want to put it that way, that's fine with me. Okay,
then
fine.
the tangible became a separate
Okay,
entity.
fine. Okay, fine. Yeah, now and that's, by the way, and that's the reason why we have mortality. And when Mashiach comes, by the way, what are we obsessed about Mashiach for? What's the big deal? Okay, is life so difficult for us right now that we need Mashiach? The answer is yes. With my 5-car garage and my 3 homes in Aspen and Chevy Chase and somewhere else in Palm Beach, right? And my 3 country clubs. What?
I knew you were rich.
This is just the beginning, right? So what? Is life so difficult that we need Mashiach? Right?
Spiritual.
The answer is yes, because we are spiritually suffocated. We're spiritually suffocated with our ego. When Mashiach will come, why does it say that we'll live again forever? We'll live forever. Why? Because the ego will be uprooted. It will be removed from us. We won't need to check the ego.
Back to Gan Eden.
We'll be back in Gan Eden, effectively, an improved Gan Eden, right? And a Gan Eden which is being illuminated through our brachas and mitzvahs, right? As we spoke about in the previous class, right? So it's an improved Gan Eden. It's not just a Gan Eden that we just entered. It's a Gan Eden that we actually built.
It's not a physical one. It's
a physical world. The whole world will be Gan Eden. Because God gave us that little Gan Eden before. But this is a Gan Eden that we built. This is just connected to the previous class that we learned before, right? But that's why it's so important for us to do that. And if we don't do it, it's a chait, right? Got it? Okay? So, getting back to this. So once, why will there be why will there be immortality when Mashiach comes? Because the ego will have been uprooted. The animal soul will have been completely cleansed and purified. We will no longer experience a dichotomy. We will no longer experience the pain of conflict.
So no more animal soul? It's only a godly soul.
The animal soul will be sublimated to service the godly soul. For example, animals are good.
I agree.
You know, animals do things for us that humans can't. You ride a horse, and it's animal. It's beautiful to ride a horse, and the gracefulness of the Arabian horse, and the ox that's threshing the floor. You don't want a human doing that. You want the ox to thresh the grain, right, and make it, do all the beautiful things that we need, right? So the animal soul will be perfectly harnessed with a yoke to service the godly soul, instead of feeling a conflict internally all the time. Think of a marriage. You want to love your spouse. You don't want to have to struggle with all sorts of other thoughts, right? You want to just experience pure, unadulterated love.
Sure.
That's beautiful. Yet as human beings, we're flawed, and we're always thinking and seeing and wondering, analyzing, right? You don't have to deal with that. You want to just be able to immerse yourself in the majesty of the relationship and of the love and of the beautiful stuff. It's great, right?
Is this only for the Jews, for the Mashiach? Because
I don't think so.
2%.
I don't think so. I don't think it's only for the Jews.
No, because I read something that it's for the Goyim have to just complete their 7 mitzvahs, Noahide laws, and they're considered righteous, so they would be living
It's also the Isaiah prophecy. that
Well,
Yom
again,
HaShem
I don't want to get a little off topic of it, because remember, I always like to understand what we're talking about before we understand what we're not talking about. But just to answer your question, it's not only for the Jews; it's also for the righteous of the nations. And in fact, the Rambam writes, Maimonides writes, that the righteous Gentiles will acquire a godly soul, a Jewish soul, when Mashiach comes. Yeah.
The Mashiach. Will Mashiach come and purify us? Or do we have to be purified? Do we have to purify ourselves for the Mashiach to come?
It's a bit of both, and neither. It's both and neither. I know that sounds complicated. It says like this. It says that Be'ita achishena, the Mashiach will come in its time. I will hasten it. In its time, I will hasten it, which is a paradox, because if it's in its time, it's not hastened. If it's hastened, it's not in its time. And the answer is, if the Jews are meritorious, it will be hastened. If they're not meritorious, it will be in its time. So that's why it's both, right? If we're meritorious, we'll bring the redemption earlier. We won't have to struggle with shootings and bombings and manifestos and mishugas and locked doors and stupid things like that, right? We won't have to deal with that, because the world will be purified, because we will have been meritorious. But if we're not meritorious, then it's going to be in its time, right? So there's definitely I think there's certainly a revolution going on in the world today, a spiritual revolution, where Jewish people are certainly coming back to their roots, and they're embracing. I mean, certainly you can look at the Chabad movement with 4,961 centers around the world. That they're experiencing they're making great strides in embracing our fellow Jews and helping them find their way back to themselves.
We're preparing ourselves.
Yeah, I just wish that we were just so frustrated, because the Rebbe said today, actually, in 3 days' time in 1992, he said, everything's done. I did everything in my power to bring Mashiach already. I don't understand why he's not here. And the Rebbe was pained that we should have to struggle. That we should have to struggle with so much pain and suffering. He's like, I've done everything I need to do. He's like, he said, all I can ask you to do is do everything in your power. Just do everything you can. He said, do everything you can to bring Mashiach. Do another mitzvah. Purify the world. Light it up. Let's stop messing around. Just it's enough already. Enough suffering. And this is in the 90s. So back to here. I just want to develop this theme, because it's a bit of an important theme here. Back to what drives the animal soul, right? So we spoke about what's driving the godly soul. I think we've spoken a lot about that. Is godliness, and how. But what drives the animal soul is ego. Now, we spoke 2 weeks ago in our previous lesson. We spoke about how ego is the futile pursuit of happiness. We spoke about how ego is never going to get you to happiness. And I just want to expand on that for just a quick moment. It's a little off Tanya, but it's very connected here. And that ego is the thought that I'm missing something in my life at this time. Ego is what makes you compare yourself to others.
The grass is greener.
Right. Ego is always obsessing about how I have what you don't.
You
Right.
have what I know.
Exactly. Right? Or either way. Right?
Right.
If you have what I have, if everybody has what I have,
What I have is not so good.
then what I have is not good enough.
It's the pursuit of trying to get what nobody else has.
Right. It's George Orwell's Animal Farm, right?
Yeah.
We're all gonna have the same. All animals are equal, except for some animals are more equal than others, right? Right? Because we have to have more than you. I can't be in charge of communism and have the same one-bedroom apartment as you do. I mean, I've got to be, I'm going to have more than you, right? And that's why communism was such a dismal failure. And that's by the way, how people dress. When they say they want to dress in weird and wacky ways to express their individuality because they're trying to say something. They're trying to make a statement. I'm different to you, right? Or they want to say, I'm the same. I'm dressed like a chassid, right? I want to blend into my group, which is not your group, right? Right?
Absolutely.
So there's a lot. Clothing is very powerful. And look, I mean, I can tell you that as for myself. I mean, look, my wardrobe is very interesting, creative, right? I try to dress the same every day.
It's not the same white shirt.
No. But it's interesting. It's interesting also, people at the head of, Zuckerberg's and Steve Jobs.
Yeah, they wear the same clothes every
Amazing,
single
right?
day, yeah.
You know what? Because I kind of identify that because I don't want to express my individuality in the way I dress because it's so shallow.
No, but they do it because they want less things to think about.
That's exactly what I'm
why
saying.
he
I want to
does
think about. I want to reserve my RAM
Right.
for real creative stuff.
Yes.
I don't actually today. I'm going to.
that.
Yeah, I like that. Actually, I think it's great. I'm not saying all clothing is evil. I'm saying
No,
that.
if I could get away with it as a
And that's
woman,
why I
would
do this, by the way. To me, I dress in the morning. I get dressed so quick because I know exactly what I'm wearing. I don't have to worry about it. I know exactly what I'm doing.
I totally get it.
It's, for me, it's great. I can reserve my creativity for, and in fact, I don't.
Eat the same thing, wear the same thing.
And by the way, I don't want you to judge me on how I look. Because if I had red hair and if I had a mushroom cut or something, you'd be like, "That's so weird." You know what I mean? You look so different. I don't want you to judge me on that. I want you to judge me on what I talk to you about.
Okay, but you
know what I mean?
You stand alone. Otherwise, yeshivas would have a dress code.
Okay.
It'd be like Catholic school where you would wear the same uniforms.
They
so
do.
They do not.
Well, my school did.
My yeshiva-
Uniform.
No, by the way, in schools they do that. In schools they do the school uniform,
They do.
because they want you to not focus on the differences. Yeah.
Yes, but in a lot of yeshivas, you could wear whatever you want.
Okay.
There's no dress code like in
Fine. Well,
Catholic
some do,
school.
some don't. So what are you saying?
Saying that people want to be.
There's different
individual.
reasons. There's different reasons why people dress. So within the same school, they want you to dress the same way because they don't want you to have differences between you, right?
Yeah, they
but
want you to envy the
school to another school, we're better than you. We're the sharks. You're the lions. You're the this. We're the that.
Yes.
Right? And there's all this competition between the schools because people want to belong. My gang, my tribe, my nation, my country, and people are willing to die for this.
That's right.
Because this is ego. They're willing to murder for this. You can't wear my color because this is my gang. The red and blue stripe is my gang, your gang. Right? Ego is a dysfunctional sense of being. Ego is defining myself by you.
Right.
Ego is not defining myself based on myself. It's defining myself based on you.
Separation versus unity. So it always looks as a way to distinguish, to separate.
Right. And what we spoke about 2 weeks ago was that there's no way you're ever going to become happy when you're driven by ego. Because am I ever going to have more than everybody else? There's always going to be somebody who has more than me. Even if I'm the richest man in the world.
Always.
There's always, right? And the Talmud says, if you have 100, you want 200. You know what happens when you get 200? You think you're happy? You want 400, right? We spoke about this then, right? So, ego is the road to unhappiness. You're just never going to be able to be happy, right?
Even if it's ostensibly for the good. I was reading yesterday Isaiah during the days of King Hezekiah. He was a good king, and he was trying to caution him to just stay low, be humble, don't go up against Sancheriv, the Assyrian king, and his thought of Mashiach coming was then, if he could just keep King Hezekiah from going up against Sanherib. And he had it good till the point where he said, "No, I want to get independence for Yehuda."
Right.
And he rose up, and sure enough, destruction came.
Chizkiyahu and Sancherib?
Yes. And Isaiah, about that time, he was starting to just feel like it's not going to happen. Moshiach isn't going to come in his days.
Oh,
and
okay.
His
So you're saying his failure was his ego. How much of the world's wars have been fought? How much of the world's wars have been fought over ego?
All of them.
Like 150%, right? How many of your failures have been motivated by ego?
All of them.
That's an interesting point, right? So let me just, I got to just develop this point. Hold that thought a second, right? So I just want to develop this point just briefly. I want you to think about what motivates you. What is motivating you? What is motivating you? Think about it. What motivates what you do? We've defined the animal soul, we've defined the godly soul. Think about how much of your decisions. Remember, the decisions are thought, speech, and action. That is the ground zero. That is the actual, that's the bottom line, right? How many of your thoughts, your speeches, or your action are the result of your ego or the result of your selflessness? Right? Okay?
Jewish pride is different than
Well, no, right.
Is that your question? Is that your point?
Yes. My question is,
Yeah.
if Israelis didn't have ego and stand up for what they truly believe in, just like I don't want to compare it to a gang, that's incorrect, but a country or a group of people in this case, if they didn't stand up because of their ego and feel that they are right, I mean, you can't just have the godly soul. You can't survive just with the godly part. You have to have ego and you have to believe.
So you're saying that there's a good part to ego.
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Yeah.
You're right.
Tony
And that
Robbins says it too. He says
Yes.
without ego, you're a shmate.
You're
Exactly.
And nobody wants to be a shmate.
That's
Right? Okay. So let me explain.
Yeah.
There's pride and there's arrogance.
I like both.
Arrogance is negative.
Okay.
Pride is positive. Now, what I'm about to introduce you to now is a very important principle. Can you get the back door? Yeah. This is what the terrorists did for us. This is what the terrorists did for us. They made our lives miserable. I hate to say it. Okay, so guys, let's focus here. What I'm about to share with you is a very important word. I'm about to share with you a very important word. Okay? It's a word that comes up a lot in Tanya and in Hasidic theology. Very important word. And it addresses your question. You see, the godly soul, the animal soul, is nourished from something called klipa. Klipa is a very important word, K-L-I-P-A. Klipa. Klipa means a peel or a husk. A peel or a husk. Kuf. Klipa. It's a shell. It's like a shell. You have an orange and you have the orange peel, right?
Right.
So, the klipa serves two purposes. Well, what the klipa does is that it hides the fruit. The peel hides the fruit. Okay? It conceals the fruit. Okay?
Protects the fruit.
It also serves to protect it. Yeah. So you'll notice that the klipa has a dual function. In the case of the peel of the fruit, it not only hides the fruit, which is a negative, it also protects it. Right? So when it travels through the trucks and the factories and whatever else, and the supermarket, by the time it gets to my kitchen, it's really nice and fresh. Right? But it also hides the fruit.
Similar to the skin.
Okay, skin high. Okay, all right, fine.
Protect,
right.
Okay.
So what klipa is that energy which hides godliness. In the case of the animal soul, the animal soul derives from a klipa, which is called klipas noga, a light, the klipa of light, the shell of light, like a translucent, a transparent shell. It derives from a transparent peel. The energy, which is called a transparent peel. Because when we say that it shields, that it hides the light, it doesn't really hide, it hides the light a little bit. Sorry. You see, as opposed to the energy of the godly soul, which is pure, unencumbered, godly light. The light that God chooses to sustain the animal soul and other animalistic parts of this world is through the energy of klipa. God does not sustain them directly. He sustains them in a way that we can choose to go up or down. We can choose to go north or south, holy or unholy. There is a second kind of klipa, which we'll talk about in chapter 8, and that is called Gimel Klipas Atmeus, the 3 impure peels. The 3 impure peels, those basically are everything which is forbidden. Anything which is forbidden. Those are things that are sustained by godly energy that cannot be redeemed until Mashiach comes. Pig, for example. When Mashiach comes, the pig will become kosher again, right? But until then, there is no way for me to sublimate, sanctify the pig. Same thing goes for a forbidden incestuous relationship or an adulterous relationship. And the same thing goes with any one of the 365 prohibitions of the Torah, like slander. This juicy slander is prohibited. The word prohibited is another word for you. The word prohibited in Hebrew is asul. Asul, right? Asul. What? Exactly, the same word as jail. Asul means tied up. And a prisoner is asir. Asirei Tzion is the prisoners of Zion. Something which is prohibited, again in English, just means a no access zone. Right? Don't go, no fly zone. But in Hebrew, asul means chained. It means something which can't be sublimated. It can't be made holy. That's chapter 8. That is all the stuff that is prohibited. Why is it prohibited? Why is it a no-fly zone? Because there's nothing that I can do to make this thing holy. I can have pig from here till the cows come home, but I'm not making it holy. It's going to suck me down. It's going to pull me down. It's going to pull me down. I'm not going to pick this thing up. It's too heavy to lift. Exactly. Right? That's the word asul, prohibited. It's prohibited because you can't function with it. There's nothing you can do for it. That's chapter 8. Chapter 7 of Tanya talks to us about the translucent peel. The klipas noga, which doesn't completely hide the fruit. You can still sort of see the fruit. It actually protects the fruit, but it does hide it to some degree. So there's the opaque. Opaque is the opposite of transparent, right? There's the opaque peel, and then there is the transparent peel. The transparent peel can go either way. This would be stuff that's neutral. It's not prohibited. Like eating food. Eating food, or let's talk about money. Money. Is money evil?
No.
How about
The obsession.
how about weapons? How about guns? Are guns evil?
No. No.
Guns can be used to save lives or destroy lives. Right? So you see that it's very powerful, but it's neutral. Money is very powerful. Food is very powerful. But you see how it's neutral. Right? An active shooter, that's pure evil. Murder is pure evil. Hate is pure evil. Hate, which we experience every day, possibly, potentially. That feeling of hate, that's pure evil. That's gimel klipas atmeus. Don't go there. You can't touch it. Al tisna et achicha bilvavecha. You shall not hate your brother in your heart. You can't. Don't go there. Right? That is that's the opaque peel. That's the energy. So basically pig and hate is sustained by a godly energy which is not direct like the godly soul, which is pure, straight up energy. This is energy that goes through something called the opaque klipa, where the godliness is very much concealed. In fact, the godliness is imprisoned, self-imprisoned in there. For whatever reason, God wanted to do that. That's a different discussion. We'll get to that in chapter 8. But in chapter 7 and 6 now, we're talking about the translucent klipa, which is the divine sustenance, the energy, the vitality given to food, money, weapons, anything neutral in this world. Just, taking a walk in the park, right? A park. Is a park a good thing or a bad thing? Could be bad. If you do a Nazi rally over there, I guess it's bad, right? It could be both. It's neutral. Yeah, it's neutral, right? So, depends what you use it for. And that is the origin of the energy of the animal soul. So the animal soul, when we say it's driven by ego, doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. It doesn't necessarily mean negative ego. Because everything about the animal soul is parav. It's not milchik, it's not fleshik. It's parav. Everything about it is neutral and depends on how you choose to engage it. You can take that ego and use it to assert yourself and say, we will not allow an enemy country to invade us and to fire missiles at us, and we will respond appropriately. That's not arrogance. The world calls it arrogance. The world calls it Nazism, right? But we understand the difference. That's self-defense, and they want us to be a shmata. The world loves, you know what kind of Jews the world loves? The United Nations loves? Dead Jews. Everybody loves dead Jews, right? Like my brother-in-law told me, he carries a weapon in California. He told me, I'd rather be carried by a court of 16 than by
judged by a court of 12.
Than by
carried by six.
Than carried by 6, right? Which is what you said before. I'd rather be judged by a court of 12.
Did you hear what Danny Alone said today?
Yeah, about New York Times? No.
About Israel.
No.
At the UN.
What did he say?
He says there's 3 things that sustains it. It starts with God gave us the land of Israel. It's in the Bible. It's in the Torah. And then he talks about, and then there's legality, there's self-defense, but he made it first item.
Beautiful. I'm glad he said that. So
because
that's our only claim, by the way. But let me just wrap this up here, Bob. So I just want to say that how did I get into the pallbearers over there? Because self-defense is not evil. That's not evil. It means I'm asserting myself because I'm not a shmata. I'm not going to let you come in and kill me, God forbid. That's not evil. It's not ego. It's parav. However, if you do take it to an extreme and you say, well, I'm going to bully everybody in my neighborhood, I'm going to bully my neighbors, I'm going to go into the Crimea and conquer them, right? I'm going to go into other countries and dominate them for their resources, plunder them. That's, of course, their arrogance. And that would already be a bully. That's already an obsession of ego. That is a problem. So the animal soul, in conclusion here today, is very, very different to the godly soul. Whereas the godly soul is sustained by God's direct light. It's like when you love someone. When you love someone, you when you love doing something. When you what's a bill you love to pay? Give me a bill you love to pay.
Bill I love to pay.
Come on, give me a bill you love to pay.
Temple dues.
Not a bill. Is that something? What's a payment you love to make? Is that not a payment you love? The housekeeper, yes. When you pay a housekeeper. Right?
You love to pay it?
I want to think of a better example. When you buy your wife a gift, okay? When you buy your spouse a gift, right? That's something you love to spend, right? Makes sense, right? So you do that like this. You give it to her and you love it. It's beautiful. It's terrific, right? But then there's a bill, like taxes. The IRS, something you really don't like to pay. You pay it. You never pay it like this, like behind your back. Right? You pay it behind your back. You pay it like in a way that's, with your face, you pay with your back. That's why another word for the klipa is the stuff that God doesn't really want to sustain. He only sustains it because as a means to an end. God sustains the forces of neutrality because he wants us to have freedom of choice. He wants us to have freedom of choice. That's why he creates the whole thing called klipa. Until Mashiach comes. He creates it so we can be able to choose. If there was only a godly soul, there'd be nothing to choose. He gives us this klipa only as a means to an end, not because he wants the klipa. He puts it as a means to an end because he wants us to be able to choose, and that's why he does it as a backhanded thing. And that's why it's called, another term for it, it's called the sitra achra. The other side. It's Aramaic for the side of the back. It's something which, when you pay someone that you don't really want to give, you do it like this. I don't see your face. Get out of here. Take this. Goodbye. I don't see you again. Right? That's how you give someone which is not in your true desire. Right? And that, folks, is really summing up what drives the animal soul. It's driven by this translucent peel energy, which is called klipa snoga, and you really have to meditate on this concept to be able to get more comfortable with it, right? Realizing that there's only two things in this world. There's three things in this world. There's only three things in this world. There's that which is pure holiness, and then there's everything else. Within everything else, if it's not pure holiness, like Shabbos candles or tefillin, if it's not pure holiness, then it's klipa. But within the klipa, you have the forbidden klipa, the tied up, the chained up klipa, which is the prohibited stuff. And then there's everything else which is neutral. And it's waiting for us to sanctify it. And you can totally mess it up. It's totally neutral. Every piece of real estate, every encounter, every conversation, everything is a perfectly balanced scale to see how you're going to deal with it. Are you going to make this beautiful? Are you going to make it holy? Are you going to bring it home? Or are you going to complicate it a little bit more, right? And that is the neutrality of the klipa. By the way, remember how we said that the garments of the godly soul are higher than the godly soul. They raise it up to connect with God, right? Remember we said that? And we said the mirror image is the animal soul. So what do the garments of the animal soul do? They schlep it down. They schlep down the animal soul. Whereas the garments of the godly soul pick it up, connecting it intimate with God. The garments of the animal soul schlep it down. Why? Because the animal soul in and of itself is klipas noga, is transparent light, transparent peel. Right? It's only a slight concealment of godliness. It's neutral energy. But when that soul engages in a thought, speech, and action which is forbidden, then it schleps the soul into the chapter 8, into the 3 prohibited klippas, into the opaque peels. So it schleps it down. In and of itself, the soul is neutral. When engaged in the bacon, in the lashon hara, in the thinking of the hate, it's now tied up in sinfulness, which it can't lift up, right? So just like the godly soul is lifted through its garment, the animal soul is schlepped down through its garments. Okay.
So how does teshuvah change anything?
Okay, so teshuvah is in chapter 7 and 8. We'll talk about that in future. Okay. What that does is that, and this is really going to need more time, but the teshuvah can potentially redeem even the 3 klippas, but it's got to be a very deep kind of teshuvah, which is going to be explained in chapter 7 and 8, particularly chapter 8, okay? But also 7. And I just want to see if there's something else which I want to mention to you before I call it a day here. I'm sorry. Okay, so the last thing I just want to say to you is, in closing is like this. I just want to wrap it up with this little point over here. So the godly soul. No, we spoke about this klipa, right? I just want you to realize. No, I think this is good. Where we ended up over here is fine. I think it's okay to leave it over here. Do we have any questions?
It's a lot to digest.
Yeah.
Should I answer that?
Well, in the same day.
Okay.
In the same day, in the same hour.
Well, I like that. She's my mogul.
Between
No.
the klipas tummy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. You can vacillate all day. Absolutely.
But if you're in a chained klipa, so that does not enchain your soul. It's just your soul is like visiting.
During the duration of that engagement, you're enchained into the klipa. We'll talk about it more in chapter 8, but yeah, I mean, and then afterwards you're back to yourself, yeah.
Thank you so much. This was really, really, really good.
Okay.
Thank you.
I finally clicked this time.
We were
I'm like,
blessed to have a very good Arab driver on my trip to Israel. He took us to this
Moses' mosque.
The ego, the id, and the
because
ego.
Muslims believed in our prophets. They believed in all of this. They came
You know,
later.
can
and
I just say one thing about this?
they
I was
honored
going to say, Gail and I have had some deep conversations about this.
Moses'
How
mosque.
how contemporary wisdom wants us to leave go of our ego.
Wants us to
Let go of our ego. At that lecture,
Surrender.
he wants us to surrender our ego, and they want us to go into a state of being, right? Remember how he wants to go into transcendent being, right? Into transcendent higher consciousness. So I just want to say that from a Tanya perspective, it's not just moving away from ego, because as human beings we're very defined creatures. We need to sink our teeth into something, and it's almost very difficult to have to tell us what not to relate to, and tell us to just be.
I know, but he does clarify that. I actually sent you a new video
I didn't
you
get
should
to it.
watch. But what he does say is that the reason he emphasizes being so much is because that way when we get to the doing, which we should get to and need to get to, it should come from a place of neutrality and being rather than being sucked in ego, emotions, whatever, because then decisions that come from that place are never good. But if you can get yourself to a state of being, even if it takes you a minute, you might be that person who only needs a minute.
Okay.
But the whole purpose is, and he doesn't explain that a lot in the beginning, but later he does get to it.
That?
Eckhart Tolle. So that he talks about you must experience and know what it's like to be in a state of being, and then from that place of being, like from that place of presence where you've created distance from your emotions, you will then be guided as to what the right.
So fine. So I just want to say this:
So
that what the Tanya is
yes.
telling us is pull away from ego, but sink your teeth into the godly soul. Connect with the godly soul. In other words, it's very tangible.
Yeah.
We've given a lot of tools about what we should be connecting with, which is not just being, which might just be the human soul, by the way. What he's talking about.
Yes.
Might be. Okay?
Yes.
But this is actually allowing you to lift up higher and to sink your teeth into something tangible, which is the godly soul.
Right.
I just wanted to say that.
I
Yeah.
have a question about just what you just said. Do you think the 6 million Jews that perished sunk their teeth into the godly soul and that's why they perished? Because most of the Jews that perished
No, I don't.
were religious Jews that believed so much.
It's not true. A lot of secular Jews were killed in the
Well,
A lot of very, very, very secular Jews were killed in the
A
Holocaust.
lot of non-Jews.
The Polish Jews are very religious. The German Jews are extremely secular.
Well, a lot of German Jews got out because they all had the money.
No, hang on. Rosalind, it's a known fact. It's a known fact that the Nazis were masters of manipulation and that they manipulated our minds. My mother just told me this week that when I asked her this week, I said, why didn't Safta run away? She said, they didn't tell us. They didn't tell, Safta would say, grandmother would say, they didn't tell us we were going to the gas chambers. You're going to the gas chambers. They said, no. They said, we're going to the showers. Pack some belongings. We're going on a trip.
Right.
We're going on a day trip.
Yes.
That's what they would tell them.
deceived them
It was a masters of deception. It wasn't. It's easy for us in retrospect to say, well, why didn't they react? They had no clue. They had no clue.
Well,